my end. And so I'm going to go ahead and we're going to go real quick through some housekeeping items because I know some new people have popped in. So first off, in a large group, your mics have been muted and that just helps with background noise. And if you have questions, there's a chat feature. So just hover toward the bottom of your screen and you'll see a bubble icon, and you can click on that and it'll open a chat window. Once you've opened that chat window, there is a drop-down box next to the word "to," and you need to make sure that attendees are chosen so that you're sending your messages to everyone, because if it only says all panelists, then only the people who are from NC Virtual can see it, and your fellow attendees cannot see the questions you're asking. So we want to make sure everyone sees all of that. So check that box and send it to all panelists and attendees. And due to the number of the people in this webinar, also Sandy Griffin is our moderator, and she is going to be watching the question trends added to the chat, and we're going to do our best to answer your questions today. Some questions she will answer in the live chat, and then we also have other experts in the room that might pop in there and answer some of your questions. And then we're also going to have 2 Q&A breaks, one the session and then another one at the end of the presentation. And for more layered questions that get a little detailed and kind of in the weeds, just due to the interest of time, we will look into those more deeply and follow up during office hours or via email if we need to do that. So I'm going to have weekly office hours each Monday from 10:30 to 11:30. They will be starting April 6th. You are more than welcome to register for those. They are going to run through Monday, May the 18th. And all of our presenters are going to have office hours. So you can register for those. And I know Sandy at some point is going to share a link that has all of our different digital resources. It's the page on our website that you can find. And you can follow that link, bookmark it, and it's full resources and all the different webinars that you can register. And actually, Sandy just popped it in right there. So grab that real quick and bookmark it. So let's go ahead and so here we go. We've got welcome and thank you so much for coming, and I'm so excited to see people here and from all different walks of the different areas of North Carolina. And I know you're here because that means you're healthy and I hope you stay that way. So welcome to our PD seminar on the basics of learning management systems. This is a beginner level session, and it will provide an overview of online course components beginning with the fundamentals of a learning management system. So we have the coronavirus blues. Now what do? We are going to cover just that in this PD session. But first, we need to introduce the moderator and tell you a little bit about me. So Sandy, would you go ahead and take the mic and introduce?
Good morning. I'm an IT support analyst for NCVPS. I primarily handle the help desk. I do a lot of the back-end stuff on the LMS, and I manage our email domain. I live in Castalia, North Carolina, which is a really small town between Lewisburg and Rocky Mount. Thank you.
Thanks, Sandy. And Sandy is definitely one of the ones, if you submit those help tickets, she's on the back end helping make sure that that stuff gets pushed through. And so, good morning, I'm Elizabeth Seastrunk, and I really appreciate you being here today. I have taught CTE courses, seen a couple of business teachers in here, and that's my background, in grades 6 to 12 in the face-to-face classroom. In the face-to-face classroom for about 15 years, and I've taught online for NC Virtual since 2008, and I'm going to do my best to help alleviate any stress and anxiety you may be feeling to help steer you in the direction of feeling empowered to begin the construction of your online classroom. So let's go ahead and get started. So we've been told there's no more face-to-face, at least through May 15th, and you have been told to move your classes into an LMS platform. And many may not even know what an LMS platform is, and you are expected to move your classes to this virtual world. And on top of this, you have to maybe deal with a spouse, kids, pets, and you're restricted to your home. And I'm sure many of you are thinking or even stating, what more could they possibly put on my plate? Please know that the staff and instructors of NCVirtual are here to help you transition to this world of the virtual classroom. So take a deep breath, and you've got this. We know it can seem daunting bringing your classroom experience online. Your students may have limited access to technology at home, or maybe unstable internets like we've had this morning. You may have never taught or even taken an online course before, and you don't have a lot of time to prepare. But we know that you're committed to doing whatever you can to provide your students with the opportunity to continue to learn, and we're all in this together. And that just me out. I hope you got that back. There we go. Remember, you're an expert in your field, and you know how to break down complicated information or not so complicated material into simplified, manageable chunks of information and successfully impart this to your students. You have all developed tenacity when working with students who may have difficulty understanding a concept, and then finding alternative methods to deliver the same material, but in a way that individuals can understand and relate. Each of you have mastered the art of motivating and inspiring your students when in difficult, trying, frustrating, or stagnant times. And man, are these present times all of those situations rolled into one. Draw from your past experiences, strap on your well-honed tool belt, and remember, you do this every day in your face-to-face classroom. The only difference here is that you will be delivering the information in a virtual setting. And this change can be intimidating, but at the same time, very exciting. So where do I start? Many of the pedagogical approaches you use with students have online tools that will help keep you connected to students in ways that promote learning. For example, do you engage students in small group discussions in your classroom to allow students to process information? Well, keeping that in mind, you can brainstorm ways students can still process information in a way that is conducive to online learning, even if it isn't in the form of an in-person discussion. Online discussion forums, online meeting rooms such as Zoom, Skype, Google Rooms, Meets, or Hangouts are just a few of your online tools that you can use for discussion. So you don't have to change the way you're running things. And once you've thought through the core structures in your classroom, think about what tools might be helpful. But there is a very important first step here. You need to reach out to your administration at your school or district for the LMS or learning management system of choice and for a list of online tools you have access to. NCVirtual is not endorsing nor vetting any online tools, but we have compiled a resource list for your reference. And Sandy, if you'll pop that digital transition URL back in the chat again, just so they have access to that and they can bookmark that again. Thanks. Okay, so let's get into it. What is a learning management system? You have been instructed to move your classroom to an online environment, and you will accomplish this mandate through the use of a learning management system or an LMS. The LMS you choose is the online platform you will use to deliver and manage all types of content and resources with your students. For instance, it might be your educational lessons, all your documents, presentations, videos, interactive apps, and assessments will all be in one spot. And here are 3 examples of free LMS platforms, but there are many more. Moodle and Canvas do have paid versions which your school district may subscribe to. And in order to use Google Classroom with your students, your school district must use G Suite for Education. Students cannot use Google Classroom at a school with personal accounts. During several of our past webinars, it was evident that Canvas and Google Classroom were the most inquired about platforms. And in order to tailor this presentation to the needs of the audience, I'm going to refer to these two LMS platforms most often. There are other platforms out there, so please be sure to check with your school administrators for the guidance on which platform to use. So an LMS provides many benefits for students and teachers. For the student, an LMS provides access to information anytime and anywhere, the convenience of having all study materials consolidated in one location, and students can study at their own pace. For teachers, an LMS provides a course website with easy access to and organization of information. You can access and teach from anywhere. All your students' assignments, projects, assessments, and discussions are housed in one location, and it is a great way to communicate with students and parents. I would also like to point out that for those students with limited internet access, Google Docs, Sheets and Slides, and Office 365 have options to allow students to create content offline. So when they're away from the internet, and then they are able to update and upload when they are able to connect to the internet. So learning and work does not have to stop when they are not connected. So once the learning curve is over, your virtual classroom can be of great comfort for you. Plus, this is the big bonus, and it was for me. Once you have built and organized the course, you have it ready to go for the next semester or year. So that is a beautiful, beautiful benefit, and also gives you some motivation to get it built. So I'm going to stop for right now, and we'll take some questions. So I'm going to turn the mic over to Sandy, who has been taking inventory of some of the trending questions, and we will answer before we move any further.
Elizabeth, there really haven't been any questions. Most folks are just introducing themselves. We did have a question about the CEUs and how they'll be awarded.
Okay, yes, CEUs are going to be awarded. Mia Murphy is going to make sure that you get a certificate. And Mia, do you want to give a little detail about how that's going to work, or should we address that later?
I sure can. So guys, key to getting your CE certificate is to have registered. So sometime in the next day or two, I will email back a couple of things. Attached will be your CU certificate, and I'll have a link to this recording, and feel free to share it with whomever. But I can't email back your certificate if you didn't register. So if people are watching together, you know, or you didn't register, you need to send me an email. But if I have the email address for it, I'll send your CU along with the link for the recording.
Thank you, Mia. And I've seen a couple of questions pop into the chat. So the PowerPoint won't be sent, but the video, I think it might be linked. But I know you'll get a recording of the archive, so you can watch this at your convenience archive. NCVPS does use Canvas for all of our online content. And then someone asked about an LMS relationship with Google Classroom. Google Classroom is an LMS, or a learning management system. So it's just all different platforms doing basically the same thing. And I'm looking to see if there's any other questions. Nira asked if she gets thrown out, will she be let back in? Yes, you will be let back in. All you got to do is just pop out, and you can just sign back in like you did the first time. Edmodo is a type of LMS platform, but it operates, if I remember correctly, a lot like Facebook. So I don't know if it's a full-blown LMS, but you can definitely do a lot with it because I did use Edmodo, but oh gosh, it's probably been 10 years ago. So I don't, and I didn't use it real heavily because we ended up going to Moodle at that time. And then I see a question about any recommendations for life skills level learners. We're going to table that to the end, and so we'll see how that plays out. And I think for now we're good. So I will go ahead and move on. All right, so how can you organize your virtual classroom? So you've done your research, you've chosen your LMS or learning management system of choice, and you are ready to organize your online classroom. But first and foremost of importance is communication. Communication is key to running an effective online classroom. And I'm going to demonstrate how communication is woven into all 5 of these basic components of a virtual classroom. You may also want to organize an orientation lesson, make phone calls, send emails, or schedule an online meeting to communicate with your students to let them know where and how to begin and what your expectations are. So if your students have not already been in that platform, whether it be Google Classroom, Canvas, Edmodo, whatever you're using, then you need to do some type of orientation to help them benefit and help them with that learning curve of adjusting to the virtual classroom. So the LMS you're using will already have a basic organizational layout. And I'm going to share with you the bare basics of what NCVirtual has determined to be necessary for a successful and effective online platform. So we're going to look at a homepage. We're going to talk about announcements. We're going to touch on modules, grades, and your resources or a file repository. So the home page is simply the landing page a student sees when they enter the online course. Canvas and Moodle call it home. Google Classroom has no specific name or spot for it. In Google Classroom, I know that they can email you. They have access to that, but you need to somewhere post your contact information in addition to an email. Maybe you use Remind. Maybe you have a Google Voice number that they can text you through. Maybe you have, you want to provide them with your school email other than just a little email icon in Google Classroom that they click. And you also need to post some office hours. I don't know, every school is going to require different things, but they definitely need to have some set times where they can contact you and that they can reach out and know that you're going to be on that other line during those exact hours. So in Google Classroom, you could make it, they call it a stream. You could put your stream out there and you could just constantly maybe click to make it be at the top, or you can just tell them to always scroll down to the bottom. Okay. So and this is a screenshot of what my instructor information looks like on my homepage in my Canvas course. So the second component we're going to talk about are the announcements section. So Moodle and Canvas actually have places where you can put in announcements. In the Google Classroom, this is referred to as your stream. So think of your announcements as a way to pass on important information to your students. Through your announcements, you will need to communicate to them why. So through your announcements, you will need to communicate to them why they are learning the material you are presenting. You may have important information to share, an upcoming deadline for an assignment or a test. You may also want to provide them with an overview of the week's worth through a weekly pacing guide. If you know of a concept many students seem to struggle with, you could share a link to a website like Khan Academy, Discovery Education Video, an online learning lab. You could make an infographic. The choices are endless. Think of this as a place to provide enrichment and or supplemental items. This is also a great place to celebrate your students' accomplishments. The celebrations could be academic or personal. Maybe a student submitted an outstanding project, or you might want to recognize students who are keeping up with their work. Or celebrate birthdays with a piece of virtual birthday cake. Have fun and be creative. And I'm sure your students are missing you, they're missing their classmates and their friends. And these celebrations are one way to maintain a sense of community with your students. So don't overlook celebrations. In my past experience, students like seeing their name up in lights and those announcements. And if you miss them for anything, they'll text you and let you know, hey, I met that deadline and my name wasn't up there. So believe me, they pay attention. And I want to stop for just a second and I want to look at the image that I chose to put up there. So we've got this poor child on one end of the computer with his head down or her head down, and the teacher is, you know, reaching out through the computer to touch them. So I know we've moved virtually, and I know you're not there in person to, I don't know what type of teacher you are, but I was definitely one that would hug my kids or put, you know, my hand on the back of on their shoulder just to let them know that things are going to be okay. And if they're frustrated, you know, you could just be there for them. You can still do that in the online world. And I've taught long enough to have some pretty cool experiences, even though we've been virtual, to have students come back after the fact and say, I know you were just, you know, my online teacher, but I can't tell you how much you touched me or how much you helped me. So it's possible. You just have to make a little bit of effort, I guess, different effort and find different ways to get them. So don't be discouraged that you're not seeing them. Just let them know you still love them. So next, we're going to talk about modules. And modules refer to the organizational method for delivering the standards, objectives, concepts, and information you want your students to master. So I want you to think of a module as a unit made up of individual lessons. And lessons can be a day or a few days worth of work. You already have your standards, objectives, essential questions, lessons, assignments, projects, and assessments all gathered. You've done this because you've taught for a while, so this is already there. You will just need to deliver it in a virtual platform through your LMS of choice. There are many grab-and-go pre-built lessons being shared over the internet to help with this transition. So take advantage of them. How you structure your content with help will help your students understand the expectations, the process, and the path they need to take for successful online learning. So let's look at how you might organize your module. So a module, or like we said in Google Classroom, it would be called a topic. So in Google Classroom, I last used Google Classroom less than a year ago, and they didn't have this feature. So you can actually organize your assignments in topics. So with the module, the topic, you want to come up with a descriptive name that describes what they're going to be learning. And then you're going to create content pages. And the content pages we've found works really well to be organized in this manner. So you may have a pre-assessment where you're going to, test to see where their prior knowledge is and where they are at the moment. Then you come up with an introduction. So the introduction, I want you to think of that as you are in front of your classroom face-to-face, and what do? You've got your your whiteboard that typically has your objectives, may have your standards, and you always have that essential question up there so the students know what they're driving toward. You also typically at least have some type of a hook to get them interested so that they have some buy-in into the lesson. So that introduction, you've got to come up with some way to communicate with them this is why we're learning it. You could have a video of yourself talking with them. You could have just text. You could have a video that you found on the internet that you can link in. So there's different ways that you can do it. It's just whatever works for you and your students. So that's what that introduction is. And then you would have a lesson 1, and you need to make sure you've got notes in there for them, whatever method you deliver them, whether it be text, video, audio, you talking with them, you having a Zoom room. It could be a link to your Zoom meeting. Then you might have a formative assessment, and then you would have an assignment that would cover those notes, and then so on and so forth for however many lessons you would have to cover the content of that module or topic. And then you might wrap it all up with a comprehensive assignment and then a post assessment. So you can organize it that way if you'd like. We've found that that works extremely well. Excuse me, and continuity is really good. And you know how kids, they like their repetition and knowing what's going to happen in the classroom. So I've taken a couple of screenshots, and this is a screenshot of my classroom. I believe this is from Principles of Business. I'm a CTE teacher and I teach mainly business courses. And so these are 3 of the top modules. We've got a getting started unit, which is like that orientation I talked about. It just gives them the nuts and bolts of how to function and work in the Canvas learning management system. And then I've taken a screenshot of module 1, and there's that description of what that module, it describes what they're going to be doing. They're going to be learning how to foster business relationships. In module 2, they're going to learn about information management. And then those modules expand. And then the modules expand, and this is the layout that we had talked about. So the module 2, introduction and objectives, that's where the objectives, the essential questions, the standards are all laid out for them. That's where you get your hook. They've got that pre-assessment. And then here, that module 2, lesson 1 overview, that's where you can give that teacher talk, where you are giving them information about just the overview of the lesson. Then you've got your notes, you've got a formative assessment, and you have a lesson 1 assignment. And then you just go on and repeat from there. So that's kind of how a layout that we found works really well with students, and it's just a good way to organize. And then the next item you'll want to look at creating is a place to have resources. So this is where you would organize, you could organize them within a module. You could put them on Google Drive and share the link. Your resources could consist of links to extra help websites and videos, formula sheets and files if you're teaching math or science, tips and hints. They could even be test-taking strategies. If you're business, you know about an internship, you could have a Google Doc that just gets information out there about internships and job shadowing. If you teach seniors and you've heard about some wonderful scholarships, you could have a live Google Doc that you just kind of maintain for them there. So it's one of those things that's just, it's whatever you feel is important for your students to have all organized into one place so they know where to get it. Okay. Slide 20 is next. So what should your students do each day? Assuming students have access to a device and the internet, this is a bare bones list of what student expectations should look like each day. So they need to log in daily. Students are expected to attend school Monday through Friday, and those expectations extend into the online environment. Even if a student has worked ahead and completed the work for the week, they still need to log in and complete the following task. They need to read your announcement. Now, your announcement could be in a stream, it could be an email, it could be an announcement in Canvas because they have an announcement section. then this is your main way of communicating and letting the students know what to expect each day. They need to check their messages, both in the LMS and their school email or any other mode of communication you decide to use with your students, like, for instance, Remind. They need to review their grades and feedback. And this is an important thing to instill in them, because you are not there to physically hand back their graded work. So they need to check each day for feedback from you on their work. It is important for you to provide detailed, directed feedback so the students understand their misconceptions and receive an explanation of how to find further information to master the objectives. In your feedback, you could provide links to websites, videos, screencasts of you grading their assignment and providing feedback. For example, when grading, for me, one of the items that students will submit is they have to create an income and expense statement. And some students get that right off the bat, but some really struggle with it. So a lot of times what I do is I'll do a screencast of me explaining their misconception of how to calculate, say, for instance, cost of goods sold. And they watch my video feedback, but then the secret there is I give them the opportunity to make corrections, and then they turn that in. And so not only have they attempted the first time, they've seen my feedback, they've given the opportunity to make corrections, resubmit, and then they can earn back points. So that works really well in that grading feedback. And then the next thing is, it's really important that they have some type of a pacing guide and that they follow it. So as in the face-to-face classroom, it's important for students to keep up with the pace you set for your class. And if you create and follow a clear pacing guide, your students will have a better chance of knowing. Students will have a better chance of knowing the expected work pace and thus keeping up with your schedule. And then the last thing is empower them to ask questions and request help. Be prepared to hold online office hours for students to attend, answer their questions through the LMS messaging system, email, text, or a method your school uses. Be responsive. It is just as important for you to check your messages and email multiple times a day as it is for your students. So this webinar served as an informational session to explain the structure and components of an LMS. And I'm sure you're excited about building your virtual classroom and creating your first module. You know what works for your students and what works for you. Now you just need to take that information and tweak it a little. And like we always do, when we get new information, we always take that and tweak it and do whatever works for you in your virtual classroom. And so before I open the floor to questions, I'd like to share a link that will take you to a listing of all the webinars NCVirtual's put together to help in this transition to online teaching and learning. And Sandy has already shared several times. Just want to add it in another time so y'all can make sure that you see the other webinars that are being offered with the next steps. And so there's that chat there. So thank you so much for letting me share with you today. I hope I have helped shed some light on the world of learning management systems and also helped to alleviate some of your stress and anxiety. And the floor is now open to questions. And Sandy, I'm going to hand the mic over to you for right now, and then we'll see what the trending question.
Sure. We've had a couple questions on how to create a screencast. If someone wants to answer that one.
I just dropped in a little chat comment there. There's just many options for screencast apps. If you're using Chrome, go to the store. There's several free extensions that let you record your not just your browser, but your desktop. Elizabeth, any suggestions that you have?
Well, there's Screencast-O-Matic. So if you'll go out and look up that, there is also Jing, Jing. I use Jing. I love Jing. Screencast-O-Matic, though, is wonderful. Also, the free versions will limit you to 5 minutes. So you will want to, oh, and Loom, yes, Alicia, Loom is wonderful. And you can also even do things through PowerPoint. PowerPoint will let you do slides and record your voice over it. So you can do PowerPoint, Google Classroom, sorry, not Google Classroom, Google Slides. I have not tried that with Google Slides. I know the last time that I was in the face-to-face classroom, they did not have that ability, so I'm not sure. But it's Google PowerPoint ends up being very, very easy, and you can share that and export it as an MP4, which is a video, and you can put up just that video and they just watch it. And so that is very easy. Amber, are there any other, I said Amber. Sandy, are there any other questions that we need?
There have been a couple questions on Canvas, and just to let you know, we have another webinar coming up at 11:30 that is Canvas specific, and you can find that information on the digital transition page, the link that we've been sharing. I'm gonna drop that in the chat again real quick.
And I think we're doing another Google Classroom webinar. Is that right, Mia? We had some technical issues with our last one. We weren't able to post the recording online, but it was, we know a lot of people are using Google Classroom. It was a great presentation, and hopefully we can do it again just to have the archive session. I don't think we have a link. We definitely don't have a link to the archive for the Google Classrooms. We weren't able to capture it. And we don't, I don't think we finalized the next Google Classrooms presentation, but I'm pretty sure that we're doing another one.
Look at. And if you can't make the Google Classroom or any of them, if you'll Google, if you'll do an internet search on Google Classroom, there are incredible instructional videos out there. I watched one just over the weekend, and that's how I found out that they'd added the new topics area, so you can organize all your assignments into topics instead of it just being, you know, just a listing of all the assignments that you want to have your students complete. And so it's very, very easy to use. And there are wonderful resources for all the LMSs out there that can give you some instructional videos on that also if you have trouble making any of the webinars or watching the archives.
And Elizabeth, we have a question about communication tools. They want to know if there's a communication tool they can embed in their LMS.
Yeah, I was reading that, and if you're using Canvas, Canvas already has a Canvas inbox, and you have your announcements that you can talk, you know, just announcements are going to be mainly one way, but the inbox you can communicate through. Google Classroom also has that kind of inbox or email feature where you can talk back and forth. But as far as embedding one, I don't know if you could embed, I don't know of how you could embed one unless someone else in the room knows something different than I do. Okay, I see Patricia asked the question, how can I set up my own Google Classroom and not be a co-teacher? If you're setting up your own Google Classroom, I'm not real sure why you are a co-teacher. Because when I set my Google Classrooms up at my face-to-face school, I was the teacher. So that might be a question for your tech department, or maybe your library, your media specialist in the library, or maybe your if you have like a technology just instructor there, they may be able to help you with that.
I'm also seeing a student that keeps out the how to register for the session that you mentioned earlier, as well as for the recorded session of this webinar will be. And I'm just going to pop into chat this link with everybody on the digital transition. It's on our website. You can register there as well as check out the video sessions.
About Zoom meeting and options. Is there anyone in here who has a little more experience with, because he's asking about limiting some of the participant interaction, like sharing screen and seeing other participants. If there's anyone who could answer that real quickly.
The features are a bit different if you have a paid or free version, but I think the settings are similar in both, and you can set up your meetings to limit attendees on, just about everything, where only you can see their chat, where they don't have audio, where they don't have video, where they can't annotate on the screen. I'm pretty sure you have that in both versions, and you can control most of that when you set up the room, when you initially set up the room.
Okay, I've seen where someone is asking for some guidance on feedback, that they're not real sure how to provide feedback. Feedback can be delivered in so many different ways. So for instance, if I have, there's a discussion forum and the question is regarding monopolies, and that they need to explain to what a monopoly. Oh, I know, I have a better example. It's about the Amazon key, and it's talking about how Amazon has proposed adding this key to give their delivery people access to your home when you're gone, so you're not leaving packages outside on a stoop. So they have to describe it, give a link to where they got their information. They have to give pros and cons of it. They just have to discuss it. And then they have to comment to 2 other students once they've read theirs. And if they agree with their comment, or if they don't, whatever, then I can come in and I can ask them more leading questions, because some of them will just say, well, I wouldn't want someone coming in because they could let my dog out the door. But they don't give alternate solutions, because one of the alternate solutions out there is Amazon Locker. And that lets me know that they didn't go in and do as much research on it as I wanted them to do, because Amazon Locker is something that is safe. That they have to go to a physical public place, they have a code, and they can access their deliveries there. So I can give some feedback verbally that adds a leading question that says, what is another alternative? And maybe provide a link in that feedback. Or if I am using, said earlier with the screencast, I can record myself grading and, talking it through. Because think about when you sit down and you explain to a student why they missed something and you are helping them understand it. That's what you're doing in your feedback. You just got to figure out the most effective way for you to deliver it. You can record your voice, you can record the screen with your voice, you can do it you can just write it out in text, and you can provide links to extra just information out there on the internet for them to look at. So I hope that helped answer the You can absolutely use existing videos from different sources. The main thing you want to do, though, is when you use those existing videos, you need to make sure that you have either access through them through a subscription with your school for like Discovery Education, and you need to make sure you're following copyright and fair use guidelines. And there's going to be a webinar about copyright and fair use later. So if you have any questions, because you don't want to get in trouble using copyrighted material in your classes, because once you put them online, the fair use is you're still covered, but you've got to give citations, and you need to really work on using your common Creative Commons areas, public domain, or anything that has given you permission to reuse. And you can change your searches in your Google searches to make sure you filter out any type of copyrighted, and it's only stuff that's labeled for you to reuse. And that's all going to be shown in that webinar. So go ahead and sign up for that if you have any questions on that. Well, thank you, Robin. I was afraid it was too simple. So I'm glad you're finding value in it. Thank you. Okay, I have a question here for a good LMS resource for English language learners with limited English. The LMS is going to just be the shell, the platform for you to deliver it. So whatever you think works for you, and then, if you need to be, putting, say, for instance, your information up there in Spanish or whatever the language is that they're using for those ELLS students, then that's what I would recommend, is whatever your school's recommending. I do know, and I'm not promoting it, but Google Classroom is very easy. It's just, it doesn't have a whole lot of bells and whistles, and it's just a very easy place, but Canvas is too. And Canvas has a free version if your school does not pay for the subscription, and the free version does a lot, and it's very easy to organize in Canvas, and they have wonderful support there too. So those are just the two LMSs that I mainly have experience with, so that's why I'm talking about them, and those are the two LMSs that were trending in our past webinars. So that's what I would choose, whichever one you find the easiest, and then tailor the subject matter you put in there for your English language learner.
I think the question was revised for English language arts and for middle school. And all of our middle school students that take courses with us, they use Canvas, and they operate, completely fine in Canvas. So if they operate fine in Canvas, I'm sure they would in Google Classrooms as well, where there's really less features for them to use. But they're completely capable of in the middle grades of navigating around Canvas and using it.
Okay, we have a question about online interactives, games, activities that we would recommend. For now, I would recommend doing an internet search, and I'm not trying to pass that off, but that we don't have time, just in the essence of time. And we have an upcoming webinar that's going to address just that. So make sure you check out that digital transitions page and register for those webinars, because we probably have one coming up that will help touch on that.
Elizabeth, we have a question on how to implement required live classes. I guess Wake County's requiring that for students.
I guess my question is, if Wake County is requiring that, are they giving you suggestions for tools to use? Because I know that we use Zoom. Zoom's very easy to use. It's easy to control when you have, and then Google Meet's another one that's very easy. Google Hangouts you can do. There's Skype. Skype does not have the, it's not as restrictive. Google Meet is going to be a little more friendly as long as you are using the G Suite for education and you can use Google Meet with your students. That would work. Zoom, they all have the ability that when you leave that online instruction, that live session, you can end the meeting for all. That means when you leave that meeting that it is closed and you don't have students hanging out being able to chat unmoderated or unmonitored. So that's a feature that is really wonderful for both of those.
Hi, this is Ellen Hart, and I'm the NC Virtual World Languages Instructional Director. And when I heard the word RLC, we do use those in our world languages. One thing that we have also found that is helpful, because we have multiple teachers who are offering multiple sessions and students can choose which ones they go to, we use Google Calendar. And that way we point students to one Google Calendar that they can then go to. Teachers then add when their sessions are. And with Zoom, actually, if that's a tool that's being used, you can have it set up to where you can create the Zoom room when you are creating the calendar event. And that way all of the information is right there in your Google Calendar to be able to use for students. So that's how we do it at NCVPS with our world languages RLCs, or required live classes, for those of you who don't know what that means.
And yeah, you probably need to follow your district lead on that. They will likely have specific apps that you can use, but you know, a live meeting does not necessarily have to be complex, like in a Zoom room with cameras. I mean, I think we're all learning lessons as we go, and it probably often best to just not have cameras on. You don't know what's going on in the background in a house, um, or even in your own house sometimes. So doing something as simple as having a specific time where there's a live chat going on, just a text type chat could also work. So then it would open up apps that you might already have at your school, like the Remind app or something like that. So those would still be live meetings. You're just not having you know, a video camera present where people are showing themselves, which I think just opens up, you know, potential other issues. And I think with younger grades, they don't want the youngest grades using the video feature anyhow.
Okay, Stephanie Weaver had a question. What tool do you recommend for getting parental approval for a student to attend live meetings? At NC Virtual, we use Google Forms. You might want to run it past your administration to verify and to just approve the form, but the Google Forms is a wonderful way to get it out there, and then all your responses are collected on a sheet. And so that's been very effective with us. And see, Haggard, I don't know specifically what is stated in your online technology permission slip. So I would check with your administrator to make sure that that covers it.
Okay, well, it looks like we're right at the 11 o'clock hour. So unless there's any other questions, we're going to wrap this one up. And we thank everybody for coming.
And then remember, we're going to be holding office hours. So if you think of anything that you want to come in and ask questions, that's going to be, they're posted on that same website shared, and you just sign up for office hours. And we will definitely, we can get a little more into the weeds in those than we can in these big meetings. So thank you all for coming. And I look forward to seeing you in the office hours. And just remember, stay safe and stay well.
And